Meanwhile, back here in New York, House Majority Leader Eric Cantor is at the New York Stock Exchange today for a series of meetings on cutting the nation's budget deficit. Leader Cantor joins us this morning from the NYSE. You're going to ring the opening bell, Leader Cantor.
Absolutely. We are delighted to be here and looking forward to ringing the opening bell at the Stock Exchange this morning. And Carl, we're here really to talk about how we can get America's economy going again. Obviously, the markets have a lot to do with small business access to capital and seeing how we can get more American jobs. And it's about job creation now. And obviously, we have things going on in Washington about cutting the deficit and spending, which is a prerequisite. But the focus today is really on job creation.
Last night, of course, Speaker Boehner talked to the Economic Club. You're going to be talking to executives from NYSE big board listed companies. Is this about trying to get big business to start hiring? We talk so much about getting small business to generate jobs, but are we trying to lean on another element of the labor market here?
Well, no, you know, listen, we're about trying to create an environment where America is competitive again. And when we assumed the majority back in January, what Republicans in the House said is our focus is going to be trying to bring down the unemployment level, to make America more competitive, and frankly, to have an environment where you can foster long-term growth. So we've got to focus on small business job growth as well as large, because as we know, we are in a global economic environment that's very competitive right now. And we've got to look at our regulatory structure as well as tax reform to make it so that people will seek America out as a place to place their capital and to build value.
Tell us where you think Speaker Boehner was coming from last night when he addressed the debt limit. It's been suggested that, in a way, the forum, the speech, was used as a tool to get the House Republicans all riled up and raise the bar for the White House when it comes to some of these targets. Was Wall Street used as a prop?
Well, you know, listen, the speaker came to New York. New York obviously is the world's financial capital. Certainly America looks to New York as a place where there are a lot of interested parties in the debt markets, credit markets, equities, and the rest. And so what he said last night was we need to make sure that if the debt ceiling is raised in this country, that there needs to be commensurate spending cuts to go along with that. What his message was, is I think what most Americans believe, that if we're going to seek an increase in the credit limit of the country, this country's got to be worthy of that, which means we've got to get the fiscal house in order. There's no way that I think any family expects, if they've got a situation where their credit limit exceeds their ability to pay, that they think they can continue along that line. And that's really the simple aim we're trying to achieve. In
order to have that honest conversation, then, wouldn't it make sense to expect some kind of extension that takes us into August? Because this would be hard to put together in time for the vote.
Well, I mean, what we're trying to do this year, Carl, is to achieve some real results, and that means real cuts. We're not interested in kicking the can down the road.
Right.
We are saying that we can and do have the opportunity over the next couple of months prior to any votes or the limit expiring, we do have the opportunity to forge some kind of agreement that we can get some real cuts. In fact, today I'm going back to Washington to meet on the so-called Biden Commission to talk about how we can begin to cut trillions, not just billions, and to make sure that we are signaling not only to the markets but to the American people that we're not going to allow the spending to continue to be out of control.
Hey, Congressman, I asked you this last time you were on. I think it was about Paul Ryan's Medicare proposals and whether, you know, that was going to be just too much for the American public to handle and would open up the Republican Party to too much criticism. You know, the Democrats were like, oh, thank you, thank you, even though most people acknowledge that Medicare as it exists right now cannot stand into the future. Probably there has to be some major changes anyway, but people don't want to hear it. And with the election coming in less than 2 years, it looks like it's been shelved. And it looked like Congressman Camp said, I'm not interested in, you know, in talking points. You know, we're not going to like put something up where it's not going to clear the Senate, so we're not even going to do it now. Was I right about that? That it was just going to be too tough for the American public to handle?
No, Joe. I think first of all, if anyone shelved our proposals, it's been the president. But we stand firmly behind the notion that you got to address the issue of Medicare, because if not, the benefits themselves will be reduced by statute. And, you know, Joe, an interesting point is this. If you look at the current revenues derived from premiums and taxes in the Medicare program, those cover only a little over 50% of the cost of Medicare. And I think if people hear that, they'll understand the system is broken. And we've got to go about the reforms that we're proposing. And frankly, we've not seen any meeting of the mind or any ability for the White House to come to their prescription on how we fix that program. Honestly, if we're going to fix the long-term fiscal challenges of this country, we've got to get serious. And what we're saying is a plan we need to put in place that protects today's seniors, but at the same time puts us on a course in which we can actually begin to go towards balance in this country.
There's some truth to the notion that the Republicans scared people about Obamacare by saying it was going to cut Medicare, and then you come around 6 months later and you want to change Medicare completely. I mean, I can see how elderly people, you know, might have their heads spinning on which party they trust on if they really love their Medicare.
Well, the difference is, Joe, you know, the president's prescription in Obamacare for health care, as well as their outline of reform for Medicare, has to do with putting the government, putting Washington in a position to determine who gets what care, essentially government-sponsored rationing of care. What we say is we want to protect those 55 and older, but for the rest of us, 54 and younger, we want to give people notice that all the rest of us are going to be in a much different system in which we're going to be given a certain amount of money to then make our choice as to what is best in terms of the health care that we need upon retirement. But again, today's seniors, those nearing retirement, 55 and older, are safe harbored in our plan, and it is a plan which actually we believe can bring the cost down out into the future, so that the American people can rest assured that we actually have a government that understands there's a serious problem and we're going to fix it.
Yeah. Leader Cantor, I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I'd imagine some of the 54-year-olds out there are a little irritated by the whole thought. But also on the idea of cuts. Understandably, massive cuts are needed. We have spent far more than we can. What I don't understand is the absolute refusal by the Republican Party at this point to consider the idea of raising taxes at the same time. It seems like in order to get our fiscal house in order, if you were an average American family sitting around, not only can you not take out more debt, but you need to look at ways to cut those spendings, and you need to look at ways to try and save and make sure that you can bring in some of that extra revenue and make sure you can offset some of the things that you have to spend money on, too.
You know, Becky, it comes back to, I think, the reason for our visit here in New York this morning, which is growth. And, you know, how do you even begin to think that imposing higher taxes on people we expect to create jobs is going to help us in a competitive posture to do that and to compete abroad? You know, we've got a situation where the American corporate tax rate next to Japan is the most disadvantaged in terms of the rate. It's the highest in the industrialized world next to Japan. We can't compete like that. And so what we're talking about is, number one, fixing the problem. If you're just saying we need to add revenues because the government needs them, the problem is those revenues, it's like throwing good money after bad. We've got to fix the problem, and there's a lot of waste and inefficiency and, frankly, programs that shouldn't even be there in Washington right now. We've got to solve that before you even begin to think that you could actually raise taxes. Yeah. And that's the crux of it. And Becky, when I was on with you a few weeks ago, we talked about the need for tax reform. Mm-hmm. And we do need to reform our tax code. We do need to bring down the rates, as I just said, but we also need to make sure we're broadening the base and getting rid of some of the special interest loopholes that some have been able to take advantage of.
The Journal, revenues are rising as the economy grows, and the Journal had a piece the other day that we could solve a lot of our tax problems if we just grow. If 1.8% isn't going to do it. But so there's an argument about how do you get the best growth? Do you keep taxes low, or there's, I guess it's a Laffer curve. There's somewhere, Leader Cantor, where it's the optimum level for raising some revenue and letting the economy grow. And we are historically at some low rates, right? In terms of marginal rates, they're historically low. But if we can be guaranteed that keeping them here would cause the economy to grow, but nobody's seeing any gangbusters growth down the road right now. The Fed's doing everything it can, and it's hard to rely on the hope that the economy starts growing to make up our tax shortfall.
Well, Joe, we're trying to do a few things in Washington to help facilitate that growth. And the one is very obvious on the cutting side, to get the fiscal house in order. But our growth agenda starts with real tax reform, bringing down rates. It then goes to real regulatory reform, is to stop Washington from being an adversary as far as business growth, especially small business growth. And we've seen instances where you have the EPA, or you've got the FDA, or the FCC, or the SEC. Pick your acronym. There's a government agency out there causing small business and large difficulties in being able to compete. And we also are looking at ways to try and help facilitate the innovation in this country. That's what's always allowed America to lead, is we attract tremendous amount of venture capital and, frankly, human capital to this country because we are the best at innovation and changing the world. We need to help facilitate growth in the innovation sector, if you will, and we are trying to push policies that will help promote that environment again in terms of helping foster long-term growth. It is about building value in America, and we really need to focus on that and look through the policy making from that perspective.
All that said, I mean, you mentioned a few acronyms of different agencies. You didn't mention, say, the FAA, which ensures that our planes are safe, and others would argue that there need to be some rules and some cops that make sure the rules are abided by at the very place where you're sitting right now, Leader Cantor.
Well, I mean, there's no question that we have a myriad of federal agencies out there. Some individuals there doing the best job they can and actually executing the way that the taxpayers would like. But there are many, many instances of situations where you have agencies that are operating on a mission that may not even be valid anymore. That's the kind of analysis we're going through. The GAO has given us a tremendous list of duplicative and burdensome activities in Washington that are counter to our desire to see the economy grow and see jobs return. So again, we're sitting here in the stock exchange, the New York Stock Exchange today, as one of the nerve centers for the markets in this country. Very important role that this place plays in terms of business access to capital. We need to get competitive again. We need America to send a signal to the world that we're open for business. That's the kind of policy direction that we're headed in Washington.
You know, the more I look at you down there, Leader Cantor, and the more I notice just how handsome you are, how good you look on TV. I mean, are you available to co-anchor Street Signs today?
Listen, it is always great to be on with the masters there in the CNBC studios.
That is an idea for Street Signs.
Yeah.
We're looking around trying to figure out what to do with that hour.
Keep that earpiece. That earpiece is yours to keep, and we'll see you at 2 o'clock at the top.
Clark Kent-esque look, doesn't he? Sort of a Clark.
It's the most nervous I've ever seen.
Yeah. He's uncomfortable, but we're both kind of me and Carl are. You're supposed to be doing this. It's 2000. What year is it? 2011. This is okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Leader.
Leader, good to see you.
Good to be with you.